I've been obsessed with this post for a while now. It's so brutally honest that it completely took me aback. It hits close to home because I have felt this way before. Too many times, really. Feeling empty and hopeless. Continuing on simply out of fear of the alternative. Despite this, I have no idea what to say to help this person. It's such a gigantic question that I don't think it can even be answered. So instead of trying to force an answer, I'll do what I usually do and look into something that tackles this better than I and most other series today ever could. Berserk. If you know anime, then you know the themes that tend to define it. Friendship, determination, resilience, all in the framing of achieving one's dream. Protagonists, especially in shonen, always have this far-reaching goal, a dream. They don't need to worry about anything, neither friends, love, nor career. All of that comes with the journey itself. The name of the game here is high emotion, determination, and passion. This is what makes Berserk unique. It doesn't follow these patterns in a genre and media that breathes them. Berserk is not simply about a hero going on an adventure. It's about a young guy trying to find his way in a world that increasingly does not want him there. This is a framework that is still rare today, and when you factor in that Berserk started 32 years ago, you realize just how revolutionary it truly is. Berserk started publication in 1989, so many aspects that we might consider to be cliché today were actually set or popularized by Berserk itself. Created by Kentaro Miura, the series takes inspiration from some of the most obscure hidden gems in manga. These are a series that the majority of fans in the West have never heard of, but that are part of the DNA of most manga. For the action and violence, it took inspiration from Violence Jack by Go Nakai, the father of the post-apocalyptic genre in manga. It depicted a post-apocalyptic setting as a desert wasteland filled with violence, biker gangs, innocent civilians, and tribal chiefs. It inspired this aesthetic in the likes of Fist of the North Star and even possibly Mad Max itself. It also popularized the use of extreme violence and giant swords. For its epic story and atmosphere, it took from Kaoru Kurimoto's Guin Saga, an epic low fantasy series full of action, political intrigue, and character development. But what makes Berserk special is its more surprising inspirations. For its character development and emotional content, Berserk took from shoujo anime, specifically series like Rose of Versailles and Aim for the Ace by Keiko Takemiya and Sumika Yamamoto respectively. This is the secret magic behind Berserk. The intimacy, vulnerability, and deep exploration of emotions being more prominent than action. Characters are vulnerable, sometimes uncomfortably so, going places mentally we all dread to go. In this way, Berserk ends up sharing more with shoujo-like series akin to Scaflowne or Inuyasha than say Dragon Ball. Guts obsessing over his place in the world, Casca dealing with the patriarchal nature of this society and the logistics of being a woman in the battlefield, Griffith's breakdown following Guts' abandonment, and of course, three of the main characters dealing with sexual assault. These are themes you don't typically see in these types of stories, not back then and not even now. This is what makes Berserk distinctly different from most series out there, especially when it comes to its protagonist. Just like the series itself, Guts looks average and archetypical on the outset. His design visually reinforced the idea of a mindless monster, huge, rough, violent, and with terrifying rage. Even his name harkens back to this idea. But that is not Guts at all. These external traits don't speak to Guts' thoughtfulness, his introspection or vulnerability.
So long as I have my sword to fight with, I'm sure to survive. Year after year, I prove it to be true. I don't want to die. For me, that is the only reason I keep fighting. There is nothing to save myself for or give myself to. I fight because I know nothing else.
Guts is the most human protagonist I've probably seen in anime. He was quite literally born on a battlefield,
I've been fighting in battles for as long as I can remember. The mercenary leader who raised me taught me nothing except how to wield a sword. I've never had anything except my sword.
He doesn't think of himself as a human being with the possibility of a future, let alone that he could shape it himself, until he meets Griffith. On the outset, Griffith seems like everything Guts isn't. While Gus is rage personified, Griffith is serene. Where Gus is brutality, Griffith is grace. Guts is lost, but Griffith has found himself. Griffith has a dream.
I will have my own kingdom.
An endless dream, so grand in its scope and so ambitious in its reach that it seems out of some fairy tale, very much like the man himself. Especially in a world where violence and cruelty reign supreme. It's an impossible dream, but yet, due to some unknown force, Griffith seems to have the power to do it, to change destiny itself. This makes him a messiah to many, to the poor, the downtrodden, those without the possibility to make their dreams a reality, be it due to status, race, or gender. This awe towards someone who can and is willing to do anything to achieve their dreams in a rotten world is what attracts Guts to Griffith. After a rough start, they become instant companions and later the very best of friends. Or so Guts thought.
A friend should never subsist on another's dream. The man who would be my friend must have a reason for living that goes beyond me. I find it abhorrent to simply live out my life for no other reason than I was born into it.
And like all who worship Griffith, Guts is the only one with the strength to achieve his own dream. This is what brings him closer to Griffith, why Griffith is attracted to him in the first place. They both have the indomitable will to go against destiny. But despite having all this strength, Guts doesn't have a dream. He survives merely because he doesn't want to die. So he leaves to find his own dream, his own way in life. And this is where his journey begins. To discern a purpose to strive and live for that gives his actions and existence enduring meaning. To live for something. I think this is why the series has struck such a chord with me, and I bet with you as well. Because I can naturally relate to Guts despite him being an impossible monster man. As a recent college grad that entered the workforce just a couple of years ago, this is just my entire state of being right now. After years of studying, I'm finally in the place society has told me I needed to train all my life to be in. Now what? Many people feel like this. Most of the benefits older generations sold us on when we were young are all but gone. The illusion of safety disappeared during 9/11. Even if you're too young to remember that day, like me, we suffered through the mental and societal consequences of that event. We had the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression just a few years after that. It left us buried in debt, unable to accumulate wealth and stuck in low-benefit, dead-end jobs. Now entering our peak earning years, we were hit with an economic cataclysm even more severe than that one. This all but guarantees we'll end up poorer than our parents. Social media promises a revolution in communication, where a connection was just a click away. Instead, it has actually driven us more apart than ever. The reason there is such a divide between millennials and older generations is that for us, there are no good old days. It has always been this way. Is it any surprise we are lonely, burned out, and depressed? Since 2013, millennials have seen a 47% increase in major depression diagnoses. Many millennials are dying deaths of despair, deaths related to drugs, alcohol, or suicide. According to a report by Time magazine, this accounted for the deaths of about 36,000 American millennials in 2017 alone. A part of this is of course money, since we live in a time of incredible wealth inequality. Many of us are having trouble finding jobs, are still living with our parents, or have serious doubts about actually starting our own lives. Uncertainty is what defines our generation. It's this combination of economic anxiety, societal pressure, and deep loneliness that has caused us millennials to constantly wonder about our purpose. But there is only so much wondering you can do. Eventually, it all just defaults to numbness. A numbness to our lives, to our futures, and to the world around us. At some point, this emptiness, numbness, or as it's most commonly referred, this depression, seeps into every aspect of our lives and being. We can't distinguish it from any other feeling. It feels like it has always been this way. Everything seems normal. We go to work, go out with friends, see our families, show moments of confidence, laughter. We fake it. We get so good at it that we even fool ourselves.
I remember lying in bed one morning and I was overwhelmed because I was trying to remember what feeling happy felt like. And I couldn't remember. And I thought there's no point in living if I can't actually remember how to be happy anymore.
This endless purgatory is very similar to how Guts starts the series. Mindlessly going through life from battle to battle, not even knowing what being happy is. This is how many of us feel today. And while the reasons we get depressed vary between us, there is one thread that connects us all. Our society. See, beyond Gus's personal journey, there is an overarching theme that spans the entire series, and it comments directly on how many of us feel in the society we live in. Destiny and causality. These are the two biggest forces driving the themes of Berserk. Causality is the influence by which one event contributes to the production of another event, where the cause is partially responsible for the effect, and the effect partly dependent on the cause. Basically the law of cause and effect. Destiny, or fate on the other hand, is a predetermined course of events. So, causality relates to the relationship between the chain of events that eventually lead to a particular outcome, aka destiny. There are two ways in which both manifest in the story, through the medieval setting of Berserk and through the God Hand. The society in Berserk harkens back to our own circa the 16th century, where patriarchy, wars between nations, succession crises, and arranged marriages are standard. Upwards mobility is almost impossible, so if you're lowborn, you're really just cannon fodder for nobles. And if you're a woman, your value is completely dictated by your usefulness to men, normally with your body. Birth status, sex, and race define how far you get in life. Society dictates your fate. Then we have the God Hand, a group of demon sovereigns who act on behalf of the idea of evil, a being responsible for the fate of humanity. They act from the shadows, making sure that everyone surrenders to their fate, making sure everyone's fate comes to pass by influencing events in the world. Causality. These are the two forces that impose their will onto Guts himself. While Guts doesn't know what he wants from life, there are forces that have already decided that for him. His society wants him to be nothing but a tool of war, and the God Hand wants to sacrifice him to fulfill Griffith's destiny. Not only have these forces created the state that Guts found himself in the beginning, they now stand in the way of him finding his purpose. This extends to everyone in the cast. Casca didn't ask to be born a woman, yet in the eyes of society, that is all she is. To this world, all they care about is her body. Or how people are corrupted by society, like Farnese, who was corrupted by the senseless cruelty she witnessed as a child and subsequently became a deranged pyrophiliac. This is pervasive in the series, how the corrupt nature of this society seeps into every aspect of the world, corrupting every institution, and how these in turn corrupt the people themselves. We see how cruelty reigns, and just how unfair the world is. But Miura makes sure we are always shown how normal people are also capable of unbelievable acts of cruelty. We are all in the asylum, and you're either a victim of someone deranged or become deranged yourself. The role of the guard is reserved for only a select few. This reflects back to our society. While it has become more acceptable today to talk about mental health, in many ways we still avoid inconvenient parts of the topic. How our society is not only complicit, but plays a major role in the crisis itself. We treat mental health as a random disease that random individuals go through. We say that it's hereditary, or maybe that it's millennial culture and their entitlement. Psychologist Oliver James proposes a different hypothesis. In his book The Selfish Capitalist, he notes that there is a clear correlation between rising rates of mental distress and the neoliberal mode of capitalism practiced in countries like Britain, the US, and Australia. For some context, my mom had a very serious battle with depression. Still goes on really. And I remember years ago when we went to the doctor, most of the conversation was about clinical history and extended family issues. Very little was devoted to societal issues. How years of economic pressure, constant worry about rising bills, precarious employment, and serious threats of eviction of someone with children to take care of slowly chipped away at someone that was once mentally strong. I'm not saying that clinical history has no factor in mental health. It obviously has. What I'm saying is that maybe this pandemic of depression and suicide isn't simply a medical issue. That treating mental health as if it were a random natural disaster is stopping us from truly understanding this plague of stress and distress. Look, depression is now the most treated ailment by the NHS in Great Britain. Is it all really just random people with random problems? British theorist Mark Fisher argues that it's not. That the pandemic of mental anguish that afflicts our time cannot be properly understood or healed if viewed as a private problem suffered by damaged individuals. We always seem to ignore that these cases of mental anguish might be related, that they just might be a consequence of our economic system. In his book, Capitalism Realism, Mark Fisher goes into more detail on this. Instead of treating mental health as incumbent on individuals to resolve their own psychological distress, instead, that is, of accepting the vast privatization of stress that has taken place over the last 30 years, we need to ask, how has it become acceptable that so many people, and especially so many young people, are ill? The mental health plague in capitalist societies would suggest that instead of being the only social system that works, capitalism is inherently dysfunctional, and that the cost of it appearing to work is very high. Mark Fisher committed suicide in 2017. This is the reason why Berserk has created such a deep connection with its fans. Because it's not just that we feel empty, it's that many of us feel trapped. This affects us all in very different ways. Some are taken by unbridled rage at the sheer unfairness of the world around us. Others by crushing emptiness in the face of an uncaring society that only sees us as cattle. This is something that I can't help but relate with Guts, because the brutal exterior of Guts masks a deep sense of powerlessness in an indifferent world. The same many of us feel today, in a society that doesn't seem to care about the vast majority of us. Maybe this isn't a bug. Maybe all this is just people responding to the world around us.